Pitch to Pro is the official podcast of USL Arkansas. This will be our platform to tell our story about the club and the special place that we call home, Northwest Arkansas. This is a journey. We want to bring you along for the ride. We'll share what's going on behind the curtain, help educate the community at large about soccer, our league, and give updates on the progress of the club along the way. Together, we'll explore and unpack our journey to professional soccer, the magic that is NWA, our community, and talk all things soccer from on the pitch to behind the scenes, telling the story of our club. Pitch to Pro podcast is proudly sponsored by podcastvideos.com. Podcastvideos.com is Northwest Arkansas's premier podcast recording studio. Equipped with industry-leading equipment, the recording studio and services save you time, money, and hassle.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Pitch to Pro podcast. I'm your host, Wes Harris, Managing Director for USL Arkansas, Northwest Arkansas's professional soccer club playing in the United Soccer League. Guys and gals, we've got a great conversation on deck for you today about finding soccer fandom later in life. And this is going to come from the perspective of a Northwest Arkansas native. So one of your own. And so I'm really excited for this convo. It's a different, unique perspective, and I think one that a lot of folks in the area will relate to. And so with that, I'd like to welcome our guest today, Mr. Parker Dodson. Parker, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks, Wes. Glad to be here.
So before we jump into, how you found soccer and your journey there, just a little bit of background on you, where you're from. You're one of the, over 60% of our population, Northwest Arkansas, is not from here.
Yeah.
You're on the other side of that. So give people a little background on you, where you're from, how'd you grow up and all that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, native to the state of Arkansas, a little bit further south, about 45 minutes down in Van Buren, Fort Smith area right there. Mm-hmm. Grew up there, went to high school there, and then moved up here in 2011 to go to school. At the U of A, just love the area, so stayed. So not really native Northwest Arkansas, but I mean, again, it's a 45-minute drive down the road. But it's crazy to see how much the demographic has changed up here from people that are just continue to moving in for business and other reasons like that. But yeah.
Nice. I love that. We'll loop in Van Buren and the River Valley into NWA.
Yeah.
At least for our purposes.
Close enough.
We'll definitely get some traveling fans up for games. So, shout out to our friends in the River Valley. So growing up in Arkansas, soccer probably wasn't super huge. Mm-hmm. It may have been around, it may have been there, may have been an option, but I think a lot of, people's experience was that it was more on the fringe. Mm-hmm. It wasn't largely played. It was a lot of stick and ball sports, traditional kind of football and mm-hmm. basketball, baseball. And so, I'm assuming that that's kind of what your experience was and growing up playing and or supporting. Right?
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I grew up, sports was always kind of my thing growing up. So played basketball, baseball, and football, American football. So, it was pretty much just year round doing that from one season to the next. Soccer was always kind of an option out there, but it just didn't have that popularity. Van Buren actually has a fantastic soccer team. They've won state a few times. I believe my senior year they did again. But just, soccer's just never been that popular sport, in North America in general, especially, the United States. But, it's just not something that I ever even paid any attention to. I knew a little bit about what it was, but very, very minor, knew none of the rules. Yeah. How any of the leagues worked. I've heard of the teams, in Europe and things like that, but just never really engaged with it because my life was always just American-based sports. So depending on what season it was, just playing whatever sport that was. But, my kind of sport that I played and then played a little bit in college was American football. So that's just all I knew for the most part. I just didn't know anything around soccer or anything like that. And you never really saw it on TV. You never heard anybody really talking about it outside of select few groups here and there. And so it just was never something, especially in this area in particular, was something that just was never really talked about or brought to light. You watch ESPN and SportsCenter and you might see something every now and then when the World Cup was on. You'd see some little highlights here and there, but you'd always just kind of not tune out whenever it came down to that because I don't know who these people are, what's going on, what's the World Cup, knew nothing of that sort. So just didn't pay much attention to it, and just really revolved around NFL, MLB, all that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
it's what I would do every Sunday, what I would do every Saturday, watching college football, watching NFL, watching baseball. Basketball was something that I played more than I would say I watched, but still kept up with the finals and playoffs and things like that. I always really enjoyed it, but just, I think with one of those things, you do it for so long that you just kind of get burnt out on it a little bit, especially when you play it growing up. If you don't have a deep passion for it, which I did for some of them, but as you get older in life, it's just kind of like, okay, it's kind of the same old, and,
Yeah.
So it just, American sports pretty much exclusively growing up, the big three overall.
Yeah. And that, I think, is a lot of people's experience.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
For up until, maybe the last 10 to 15 years, right?
Yeah.
And so and there's a whole lot of host of reasons for that. And, we've talked about soccer's journey in the U.S., but that it's still, that journey is different depending on where you live in the U.S., your experience within your family, even if you're in high pockets of soccer concentration in the U.S., just based on your family and your background and what you might have going on. Everybody's experience is different. But that kind of journey has taken a little bit longer in other parts of the country, and this is, certainly one of them.
Yeah.
But we are a soccer community now.
Yep.
And we are, there's been a whole lot of folks behind the scenes doing incredible work to grow the game at the grassroots level all throughout, different parts of the country just like this, but especially in NWA at the grassroots level, youth level, and now hopefully getting, we're bringing professional men's and women. So hopefully bringing that full circle. But you are now a soccer fan.
Yes.
So talk about how you went from didn't really pay attention, tuned out to it on ESPN highlights when they were there.
Yeah.
To holy cow, now I can't get enough.
Yeah.
And so let's start at the beginning. How did you get introduced to soccer where you were starting to I know you said you knew about the sport.
Yeah.
It wasn't that you didn't. What is soccer?
Yeah.
I mean, introduced to soccer as, maybe this is something that I might enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was the 2016 World Cup down in Rio. I just remember seeing so much leading up to it, but remember seeing all the kind of promotional stuff and ads and everything coming up for the World Cup. And I'm like, okay, what is the deal with soccer on a global level? Because in the US, it's not that big, but just like all you kept hearing about was the World Cup, and it's this many billion people watch the World Cup. And it's like, even, your Super Bowls and things like that don't reach those numbers. So it's like, there's got to be more kind of to it. So I really just started to read more about it, your Wikipedia pages, different things like that. And just started kind of learning what it all meant. I think one of the biggest things that people with just any sport in general is if you don't understand the rules and the kind of makeup of it, you can't really connect with it or kind of understand how it begins to work. So alongside of just kind of learning and reading different things like that, did pick up FIFA, the soccer game on Xbox, just because I hear people playing it all the time, and it was, still a massively popular game. But anyway, it was just one of those things where it's like, okay, I'm going to start playing this, which honestly did help out a lot. I mean, you learn quite a bit of stuff, your offsides and all that stuff. You start learning from games, because even when the World Cup first started, even learning a little bit, I remember watching that first game and I was like, I don't have a clue what's going on. Like, why is the clock not stopping? That guy was wide open. They made a pass to him, but then they threw a flag up. Why did they do that? I mean, it was great. And so it's just not knowing what it was about. So that kind of alongside of really just that summer was the alongside of reading, playing the game, watching the games, different things like that is what really kind of just opened my mind up to it. And I don't remember a crazy amount from that particular tournament, just outside of learning a lot of stuff. And then that really kind of sparked that, okay, I'm going to learn more into soccer. So that kind of led to, okay, like your traditional Google, Reddit's, BuzzFeed quizzes of what team should I root for? So I looked at La Liga and the Bundesliga, Serie A, all those different ones. And it's like, okay, Premier League is great because they're showing the most games that I can view. Plus I can understand what they're saying, which is always a big one. Just not having the language barrier there was huge. And so just kind of started going through choosing a Premier League club, and it was just, again, reading a bunch of articles, and it's like, well, here's your big, 6 at the time, mainly really kind of big 4. Your United City at that time was, blowing up, Liverpool's, Arsenal, Chelsea to a degree then as well. And so it was kind of one of those things like, what team do I pick? And so I just kind of started looking through a lot of them. And you would think as a Razorback fan that I would just say, you know what, I'm new to a sport. Let me pick a really good team so I don't have that heartbreak like the Hogs always have every week. We won't get into that too much. But really just kind of wanted to settle more on that kind of middle of the table team. One of the things that I loved so much about soccer, especially in the English league, was just the history around it. Once you really start diving in, you realize like how old the game is in of itself and how much it spans. And really in the UK especially, just how much those people live and breathe. That's their entire focus of their life is how well their football team does that weekend or that midweek. And so I started looking through clubs and then came across Everton. Just really liked Goodison Park. Love the old stadium kind of look and feel to it. I didn't pick a red or white team specifically because of Razorbacks, because I was like, I need a different color because my entire wardrobe was either black, red, or white. So came across Everton, just kind of loved the history, loved the long-standing, 100-plus years of being in the top flight of English football, which, obviously later became Premier League. But just was like, you know what? They're, at the time, a good, stable team. They're usually mid to upper table.
We won't talk about this.
Yeah, we won't get into it right now. I mean, that's a different, the last 4 seasons, it's been miserable. But really just kind of wanted to settle in on a club that I liked that they weren't in London, something a little bit different, so being up there in Liverpool was really cool. They had the old stadium, which they're building a new one now, which is fine. But I'd bounced between them and Tottenham for a little while, which I know Tottenham's Chris's team.
Yep.
But I loved White Hart Lane, loved the white kits. Like, it was just so clean and classy. Loved the logo, the Spur logo was fantastic. And shortly after me really kind of diving in, which was kind of a couple years after the World Cup, really getting invested in it, was when they announced that they're going to be building their new $1 billion stadium and the NFL is going to be playing there. And I was like, it's a beautiful stadium, still gorgeous. Probably one of the best soccer, stadiums in the world, but it just had that traditional kind of NFL look and feel to it, which I've just grown up knowing. So I wanted that kind of old English soccer club look and feel to everything, the heritage, the town, the kind of working class feel to it. So settled on Everton, which they're building a new stadium now, which, it still kind of has that new stadium feel to it. But that's how I really got settled on them, and then just started pulling for them more and more. And really, watching almost every match for the last 2 years, especially as we've been fighting relegation battles, which is not fun, but I guess you have something to cheer for in a way. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of one of those things where it just really was interesting to start watching it, watch them on Peacock or replays later on. And then just learning more and more about the club, and then just soccer in general, just educating myself more. Have read several books now. One of the ones I finished most recently, which I talked with you about, was The Club, which was basically the creation of the Premier League. Yeah. Which Everton, Liverpool were two of those bigger clubs that were at the table when they had that talk of breaking away, from the EFL's traditional setup. And, it was just kind of one of those things where seeing how that all kind of came to play, and has been fairly recently than people would realize. Yeah. It's just kind of interesting to see how it goes from what are these guys doing to, the most profitable sports, league in the world for the most part. And so it's crazy to see how that world kind of changes. But I think it was just the history of everything. Once I really ingrained it, and it really drove the desire to continue. Because I found myself the other day, when you and I were talking, I was watching Wolves and Newcastle the other day. It's I don't care either about one of those teams, but it's just I just love watching the sport, and it's just the stadiums and the atmosphere and the fans. And I was gone a little bit on Sunday, and my wife was even I actually watched almost that entire game. I was like, wow, good for you, which, to kind of get people involved with it. We watched Ted Lasso, which, I heard people talking about all the time. We've talked about it on the podcast here. We watched Ted Lasso and just absolutely loved it. It touches a bit on soccer, but it's life. It's funny. It's a little bit of everything, but it does kind of do a good job of kind of encapsulating that world of soccer and how much people care about it, and, just the history and everything that's behind it. And so that, she got her involved with it, and she really loved it. We went to the, U20, what's the word I'm trying to say? Scrimmage against JBU the other day. Yeah. And we actually went to Village Inn that night, and it was storming and everything. And I was I took a picture I need to show you. I had sugar and salt packets and everything laid out, showing her basically how fields are set up. And these are your back, these are your back defenders. Here's your midfield. Here's your forwards. Because it just, people that don't know, it's a lot to kind of break down. But once you understand the game, it's easier. But I think it's just that, and I think right now is a better time than any because there's so many documentaries. I mean, you've got the Beckham documentary just came out. You've got the Welcome to Wrexham type stuff that's all. And there's so many more films and series being made that kind of talk about that depth. But I think the more people understand that, and then for me, one of the reasons I think that just draws me in more, which you'll ask my wife, like, she's like, "You're watching football on Sunday?" I'm like, "No, not really." Like, it doesn't have that same kind of appeal that it used to because there's, the worst placed team gets the first draft pick. Cool. There's no real penalty for it. And that's one of the biggest things that drew me, especially, to the EFL was having the promotion relegation tiers. It's just fascinating to me, and I try to tell people all the time, they're like, well, what does that even mean? I was explaining to my parents, which know nothing about soccer, and got my mom super interested in it. But I was like, imagine the Yankees losing back-to-back seasons in last place or in the final three places, and then you find the New York Yankees playing at Arvest Ballpark against the Northwest Arkansas Naturals. Like, right. That's just kind of how that world works, and it's just so fascinating to me that you can get a Luton Town who comes in with the smallest little janky 10,000 capacity stadium, which has, still wooden back, no bleachers in it. And then you get big, massive stadiums like Anfield or, newer ones like Tottenham. I just love that kind of mix of how anyone can continue to progress through the league. It's just so fascinating to me. Yeah. Granted with the right money and right results, but it's just a very interesting concept. It just grabs you and draws you in, and you kind of get sucked into it like on a whole nother level than you thought you would.
It makes every single match matter.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
you get into the dog days of some of the more American sports where it's closed league and you're kind of like, two teams that are out of playoff contention that really don't care about this game.
Unless I'm playing fantasy, I don't care what's happening.
Exactly. So whereas it's completely different mindset.
Yeah. And I mean, it comes from both ends of the spectrums. I mean, not to bring up bad memories for you, but, Merseyside Derby up at Goodison last year. I mean, I'm expecting us to come in and get absolutely beat. We win 2-0. That helps us. Here we are at the bottom of the table fighting relegation, and here you guys are at the top trying to push for a championship. And it's just kind of crazy to see how, like you said, those games just have so much implications in them. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's so fascinating to me, the whole thing.
It is pretty funny that Parker chose the arch rival. Yeah. Although.
Which we didn't know each other then.
We didn't know each other then, so it's fine. And it's arch rival, but it's not really arch rival.
I mean, yeah, it's just kind of there.
The in-town rivalry that is always there and good fun, and we all love each other.
Which you're welcome for Anfield. I mean, we had it first.
You're welcome. Yeah. Thank you. So I love that. I love how you kind of got into it and really understood the game. I think that helps people a lot. I think, it is, I think something that, and you touched on it a little bit, is the continued globalization and what pop culture has done within the sport to socialize it more to the masses with low barrier of entry in a fun and engaging way. Yep. So Wrexham, Ted Lasso, it's incredible to me. Like it is not, yes, it's a show about soccer, but it is not a show about soccer.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's incredible to me the number of people that I meet that are like, I want to learn more now because of watching Ted Lasso.
Yeah.
And so you hear these types of stories, and there's a bunch of different documentaries. I think documentary culture is exploded. Yeah. And people just wanting to consume and learn more content. And so that's been great for a lot of different industries. It's been great for the game of soccer and expanding that, fan base. So it's awesome to hear kind of how you just dove in, head first. Through that, what has been, you've talked a lot about what you learned. Maybe I want to pivot and ask, like, what's maybe been the most surprising thing for you in your journey that you've learned or come to light, or has been like a pleasant surprise, or like wow, that's really cool. And see what pops to mind there for you.
Oh man. I think it's just it's hard to say because I would say it's really the only, I've picked up several hobbies later in life, but it's probably one of the only sport things that I've picked up later on. So I think I've known so much about American sports growing up that it's like, it doesn't excite you much anymore. Mm-hmm. It still does. It's still interesting, but it's not the same level of picking up something later on in life like I have with soccer. And so I think it's kind of an eye-opening experience into this whole new world of just like, oh, this is out there. And then once you really kind of learn more about it and notice the global scale of it, it's literally everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
As long as you have a relatively round ball in an open area, you can play the game, And so I think to me, that's what really drove the engagement initially, was just how many people cared about soccer on that level.
Yeah.
It's just the amount of people that sign up for season tickets in every country, and it's always sold out. And it's just crazy to me that many people cared about it. And it was so cool that it's that universal across the entire globe, because you have, American football is this, and you've got rugby is this, and they've just got, you've got other sports that have other versions of them to a degree, or they play it with different rules, different styles. And I think with soccer having pretty much that universal rule book is really awesome. You can watch any game from any league anywhere in the world, and you already know that it's the same rules. The time formatting is the same for the most part, all that kind of stuff. So you can pick up any club and start following them, and it's just the rules are going to carry over to everybody else. I think the thing that surprised me the most was how involved I wanted to get with it. And I think it's because of that lack of availability here where we live regionally. That not having the option. The closest I guess would be to drive up to Kansas City and watch sport in KC, but it's like MLS is fine. I'll watch a little bit of the MLS here and there, which I don't mind at all, but it still kind of falls back on that. If I'm in last place, it doesn't really matter. There's not that promotion relegation type of cycle going on, which I think hurts it drastically. And I think is one of the big things that keeps MLS from breaking into that next level to a degree from a global scale, because it's American soccer. You guys don't have any penalty if you come in last place, and so I think it's just kind of that stigma around it where, y'all aren't really playing for anything outside of a title. If you finish outside of that, it doesn't really matter. But I think it, like I was saying, in that engagement to want to get involved with it, from everything from, I was looking online. I sent you a couple of pictures. I was like, I think I'm going to buy me some soccer cleats. It's just because I was asking you, I was like, is there any way that I can get out and kick a ball around? Like, do you ever just go out to a field and kick and do this? And not that I'm trying to get really involved with leagues. I'm just too old and I like my hamstrings. But, it's one of those things where I would just love to get to do some more stuff like that. And it's just not having that opportunity. It just wasn't something that was ever really talked about. It was just kind of, people play soccer. Oh, cool. I don't really know what that means. Like football, basketball, baseball. But yeah, I never would have thought at 33 years old, I'm like, hey man, can we go to a field? I'm going to buy some soccer cleats and get involved with it and do all this stuff. And, to bring it to kind of USL Arkansas, that was what my favorite thing was with it. It was, getting to know you guys here through the studios. And, it was just kind of one of those things where it's like, oh my goodness, we're going to have that here and it's going to be right across the way. And it's something that you can kind of get behind and get involved with. And so that's, one of the things I've been so eager with you guys to just try to get involved any way possible, which a lot of the community has. It's just been, how do I get involved to help out? Because when you pick it up and learn it, it gets you really excited. And it's just a whole level different. To me, it's a different level of sport. There's just so much weighing, like you said, on every game that you don't get with a lot of traditional sports, especially on the American side.
Yeah, that's awesome. And, you started talking a little bit about our project. So I'll pivot it there a little bit. Is what excites you about, you touched on it a little bit, but, just to have it here, but what about it excites you about what it could potentially do, for the region? Like, what does this mean to somebody like that's grown up here, that really hasn't had, you've got the naturals, but, and the hogs, but, professional sports has largely been,
absent from the state.
Yeah, absolutely.
What does this mean for someone that's grown up here and found soccer late in life, and what excites you? What do you think it's going to do?
Man, I mean, like, I remember when the Naturals came, it was really exciting, but it's minor league ball. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's like, it's guys that are just going to be there for a temporary amount of time until they move up or down or wherever it may be. So, it's still exciting, but it's not that kind of professional team that you're looking for a lot of times. So to hear when USL came, which a lot of people, still don't know what USL is in general, realizing that we're coming in on that championship level. So we're coming in at that high tier, and then doing a little bit of research around, seeing, Louisville and all these other places, and they have, they're building great stadiums, and, they're advertised on TV, and they're starting to get to the point where they're signing more and more contracts. I know the Super League just signed another contract, I believe, or did they sign with, is it on Peacock?
Yeah, Peacock.
Yeah, so I was on Peacock looking for Premier League stuff, and I saw a Super League thing on there, and I was like, that's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not very often, which I'm not fully educated on it. How long has USL been around, the league itself?
It's been since the 90s.
Okay.
But in its current iteration and really the growth around 2009, 2010.
So, that's something too that was intriguing, is that sport has been around for so long, just in general, that it's like, Major League Baseball, this stuff, 100 plus years. There's an excitement around the team, but also to me, the league that they're playing into, because it's a relatively young league. So it's like, where could it take off to? It could end up being an entirely massive thing, which it's already grown. The amount, just since I met you guys and what you guys are doing at USL and how much it's grown during that time has been really cool. It seems like every time I look, they're signing some kind of new TV contract deal with people and adding X amount of new teams. And so that growth is really cool. But just, I think, to kind of what we alluded to earlier of how many people was the 60% aren't from Northwest Arkansas?
Yeah.
And you've got people coming from not only different cities within the U.S., but different cultures, different countries across the U.S., especially as Walmart and these other companies continue building bigger headquarters, you're going to get more and more of that. And so I think having a soccer club like USL Arkansas to come in, you're going to get so many people that are used to that being a staple in what they grew up watching, what they continually watch, that, watching games on TV is great. I've never been to a Premier League match, but I would love to absolutely go and check one out in person, because I know you've been to Anfield, and you shared your story with me about when they play You'll Never Walk Alone, like what an emotional experience that is.
Yeah.
And it's just stuff that you don't really get here with that. There are teams that have good legacies and people that feel that way about the teams here, but just the history that's involved behind it, people grow up experiencing that in their other country or region. And I think to be able to come here, and Chris has alluded to this really early on, I think in the first episode that we did, talking about how we kind of moved to a professional sports desert here in this region. And so you have to rely on either traveling or watching it on TV. I think to have it here and to have the more and more of the people that are moving here that are used to expanding and used to watching matches in person is just going to set it up to be so prime, because we have a big group and big dynamic of people that just do care about soccer, or that traditionally might not have. Just look at the women's Razorback team, how much crowd they draw is fantastic.
It's incredible.
And just to, know that there's going to be a stadium built dedicated to that, multi-use for other venues and things like that. But with its primary focus being soccer is going to be just so cool. I'm excited because I feel like it's doing it the right way. It's not kind of a half-hearted attempt of like, hey, we're doing this. We're going to be playing in this stadium and do this. Like, okay, cool. But it's the time that you guys have been taking to make sure it's done correctly, with the people in mind, with the region in mind, and then build the necessary facilities that it's going to have, I think is just going to make it so fun. But I think there's so many people in this area, they're going to get behind it and get so supportive of it because they love the game of soccer. We look at this fantastic summer of soccer we just had. We had Koba that was here that we got to play a few matches of, which we didn't do as well as we wanted to, but that's a different story. But still just the attention that gained around the sport in of itself, and then having the World Cup coming up. Like you guys have mentioned before, there's not a more prime time to really hit this level of soccer than there ever has been. I was listening to Alexi Lawless's State of the Union podcast the other day when we were talking about, it was actually right after Berhalter got fired, before we even had, Riccio announced or anything like that. But it was him. He was just talking about what a pivotal time it is for just the history and the growth of soccer in America, primarily focused around getting that higher right, because it's like, we need to have a great presence at this next World Cup.
We do.
But it's just, there's never been a more ripe time where people are just craving it more and more. I mean, I was walking around a couple of the squares yesterday doing some pictures, and I saw a couple of people in Arsenal shirt kits. I saw a guy in a Chelsea kit. I saw another one in I think maybe it was an Inter kit or something like that. And it's just, maybe it's awareness that I never would have picked up on it before.
Yeah.
But I think just having the game continue to grow like that is just going to keep going on. And I love the fact that getting something like a USL Arkansas, it is our team. It's Northwest Arkansas. It's our team, the region's team, but it's our team to be able to get behind it and actually support it. And we'll have our own logos, crests, colors, name, stadium that you can really build around, which a lot of people don't get. And so I think that's one of the things that's really exciting to me too. And I feel like the community is just going to respond so well to it. I mean, I know they already have already with emailing lists and followings and everything else, but I'm just excited to see how it continues to grow.
I love that. So we'll end on this. For anyone out there that may be on the fence or hasn't heard about us yet, not too sure about this soccer thing, what do you say to them?
Get on now, because it's a train that's moving fast. That's one of the biggest things. I would say take the time to educate yourself. Yeah. That's one of the biggest things, because if you genuinely don't understand what's going on, you can still go to the games and have a good time with it. It's the global game. It's for everyone, but I think to get to that level of where you're genuinely invested in it and genuinely want to learn and watch more, it's educating yourself about that game. But it can be done in different ways. You don't have to sit down and read the tactics of soccer or anything like that. Just Google some articles, watch Ted Lasso, watch, go on Netflix, like some of the better documentaries I've watched. I watched the Beckham one, which doesn't talk, a lot about the history of soccer and football, but it does kind of give you the weight of the way some people view this stuff. Yeah. And I think it's just that education of thinking about it on a global brand scale and how important it is to people, because literally when you get into the UK with some of those clubs, it's people's entire week is decided on how well their club has done that weekend. Yeah. You get that some with Arkansas, but it's it is what it is. It's collegiate. That's fine. It has been our pro team. Right. But I think it's just if people will take the time to actually educate themselves, it doesn't matter what age you are, get the FIFA soccer game and play it. I mean, it really will teach you so much about just different lineup strategies and the way the game flows and works and tactics. I mean, I think the education part of it is such a big focus on it, because it does give you the tools to actually understand what's going on. If you watch it, you're like, my parents are a prime example. They'll watch it and go, oh, it was 0-0. Right. And I'm like, first off, it's 0-0. But, they'll say, well, what kind of a boring game is it that you can tie? And it's like, at first I understood that, but the more I'll watch it, it's like, well, it's not just a tie. It is a tie, yes, but for somebody who's sitting in 20th place with conceding 9 goals and looking absolutely terrible at the bottom of the Premier League table, 1 point is massive. Because we have 0 right now, Right. And so I think even with that being a tie, there is still roles and still points to be had there. Mm-hmm. But if you don't understand what's going on, some of the greatest soccer matches can be a 1-1 tie, or a 0-0 tie.
Absolutely.
Because just the flow of the game itself and the passing and crosses and set pieces and just the motions can make it so interesting to watch, you know, and you don't realize how much those guys run and put into work and all that kind of stuff. It's incredible to watch. But I think the education is the main part of it. To me, at least, that helped me really get invested in it is once I learned what was going on, it really got me plugged in. And then, in all honesty, you guys at USL, I would encourage plugging into your local club, because I was really into it. But really, since I'd met you guys at USL and y'all started coming in to record, it took me to a different level, because yes, I was a fan. I watched Everton. I'd watch a few matches a season if they were on, whatever it may be. But whenever I realized I was getting that here, different level, but getting it here, it made it completely different, because I had something that I can now go visit and attend and get behind outside of a club that's a few thousand miles away. Yeah. So
I think the next thing, which we're working on it, guys, but come to a match.
Oh, yeah.
Go to a match.
Yeah.
The experience live. Soccer's great to watch, but the experience live and the atmosphere that's created and the excitement and the build up and all of it throughout the entire game is something that completely changed me as a younger kid fan and what was different. Thank you for sharing and educating. I think that's one of the biggest things. Going back to one of your points, the ties and the low score, man, it can be 28-21, but let's be honest, that's 4-3.
Oh, absolutely is.
That's just made up points.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just like one. Okay, you cross the goal line. Is it a point? Let's make it 6, and then a field goal's 1. It's like, why? I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, realistically, you could have a soccer match that's 3-4.
Yeah,
and
hit the crossbar, 2 points.
Yeah, I mean, or we could start calling them every goal is 5 points, and you could be Everton beating Liverpool 2015, and you're like, what? But I mean, people will always see it and go, oh, 0-1, like what a boring game. It's like, no, it's not. It's not how it worked.
It's always fun to me when that goes up. So, well, Parker, I think we'll cut it there for today, man. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been fascinating to hear your story and your journey in finding soccer. And listen, we can't wait to see you out there supporting USL Arkansas, part of our fan group. You already are, but out at the matches and events and things. And so can't wait to continue to watch your soccer journey grow. That's it for now, but be sure to tune into our next episode of Pitch to Pro. Until next time, cheers, Northwest Arkansas.
Thanks, Wes.